Hi everyone, my name is Shauna, in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my April wrap up for 2023. April was not my greatest month, and I could literally rant about April, but I'm not going to do that. What I will say is that I had a really bad stomach flu in April, and I've had some interpersonal issues with friends and mutuals online over April, and I have been very fatigued and I've been getting massive headaches. After the fatigue hit, I couldn't sleep well at night anymore, so recently I haven't been getting much sleep at night. So April was rough. Let's hope that May is better. And also April was rough in terms of my reading too. I barely enjoyed any books in April and I'm so upset. I read 9 books. Okay, 9 books, and I do the average star rating. Guess what my average star rating was? 2.56 stars. And anything under 3 stars to me is not good. So my rating was very low this month. I didn't enjoy that many books, but I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of April. The first book that I read, I'm really pissed off about because I finished it at 12:08 a.m. on April 1st. If I had finished it 8 minutes earlier, it would have gone into my March wrap up. But I guess it gave me a head start on the number of books that I read in April. So this book was Blood Debts. It is by Terry J. Benton Walker. Wait, I just saw something exciting. Well, not exciting, but more satisfying. When I read this book, it was listed as a standalone, but now it says that there's a sequel to this book, so it's part of a series, which I'll explain why that is exciting later. I'm not going to read the sequel, but I will explain why that's exciting in just one sec. So Blood Debts is a young adult fantasy book with some LGBTQ plus romance in it. It follows Christina and Clement, and Christina and Clement are twins, and they are mourning the death of their father, and their mother is sick, but they happen to discover that their mother actually isn't sick, she's just being cursed by someone. So they're trying to figure out who is cursing their mom, who's coming after their family, but in the midst of this all, they're also trying to unravel the mystery of a murder that happened 30 years ago. And this murder from years ago basically kicked them off of the essentially council for the magical community. So I was really hoping to love this one. It sounds awesome. I was excited for the LGBTQ plus rep, and I really love the cover for Blood Debts. It's so pretty. But then I actually read Blood Debts and I was like, you know, why do I keep judging books based on their cover? Because this book was so disappointing. So to start off with, it was both too fast and too slow at the same time. This story is really complex. The way that I just summarized this book was very simplistic. It doesn't cover the wide-ranging side stories and side characters and everything and how it all comes together, because it's impossible for me to do that without spoiling the book. And also I feel like if I describe too many of the side plots, you're gonna be like, oh, this book is too confusing, I'm not even gonna bother picking it up. And while I don't recommend this book, I don't want to deter people from picking up a book based on the way that I summarize it, you know? But at the same time, even though there was so much going on and so much complexity, and that complexity was sometimes hard to keep track of, which is where I feel like it got a little too fast at points, it was also too slow. And I was spending such a long time why does this book feel too slow? My cat literally just had a hairball right as I was talking behind me. Okay, that's fun. Great way to start my May. So what I was saying is that I was trying to unravel why this book felt both too fast and too slow at the same time. It's very clear why it feels too fast, but I was confused how it could feel too slow at the same time. And I've come to the conclusion that it is the way that the story is written. So it is Terry J. Benton Walker's writing style. Which, no hate to Terry J. Benton Walker, because it is clear that he really put a lot of thought and effort and time into writing this book, but his writing style just doesn't work for me because of how slow it feels. One of the other big issues I had with this book is that I didn't like any of the characters. Aurora is the only character that I legitimately liked in this book, but she is barely in this book at all, so like it can't save the story for me. She's such a small character. So I didn't like Christina and Clem, and I was constantly getting mad at how much they were like fighting over petty things, and I'm like, literally just talk to each other and work things out. Like, I'm tired of them feuding. I wasn't a huge fan of any of their relatives. I wasn't a huge fan of literally any of the side characters besides Aurora, as I said. Another thing that really pissed me off is you get POV chapters from different characters. So most of the time you're getting POV chapters from like Christina and Clem, but then you get POV chapters from literally the worst people in the entire freaking book. So like a teenager that is completely vile and feuding with Christina, you get a chapter from her, well, several chapters from her, and I'm like, literally, why? Why couldn't you have just given us a POV chapter from anyone else? So that really pissed me off. I also found that there was too many loose ends, which is why I'm excited that there is a sequel to this book, because I personally don't want to read the sequel, but this was originally listed as a standalone when I read this book, and I was like, how is there so many loose ends and this is going to be a standalone? And I was feeling bad for anyone who like actually enjoyed the book, you know, because they wouldn't have gotten answers to all these loose ends, but apparently the answers are going to happen in the second book, since Goodreads has now updated to say that I'll be getting a sequel. So yeah, pacing and characters I've been finding recently are the two major things that interfere with my enjoyment of the book. So Blood Debts was a massive disappointment for me. The only thing I liked about this book was just the treatment of mental health issues, because the mental health issues aren't like a major focus of the book, but there is mentions of like therapy and anti-anxiety meds helping out with mental health issues. And I really appreciate that as someone who has mental health issues and as someone who is on anti-anxiety meds and who goes to therapy regularly. That feels like a really weird word to say whenever I say it. Also, appropriate to be talking about mental health right now, since May is Mental Health Month. So Blood Debts for me, even though there was like that one small thing that I appreciate about the book, was just generally not great for me, and I gave it 1 star, and I just felt like it kept dragging on, and I was like, I just want to be done with this book. And as soon as I was done, I was like, great, I can move on to something better. So I did a reread because I needed something actually good after Blood Debts, because Blood Debts I was worried was going to put me into a slump. So each year I try and reread the Harry Potter series. I started this last year, and so it was time to pick up another one in my Harry Potter reread for the year. I picked up Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I'm flagging characters in case you don't know. So the two characters that are in this book are Hannah Abbott and Poppy Pomfrey, or Madame Pomfrey. So yeah, just pink and purple flagets for this one. I, of course, loved Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I think this was like my 4th time reading this one all the way through, not counting the bits and pieces of the audiobooks I've listened to over the years. And so, of course, this was a 5-star read for me. I love this one so much. It's like my least favorite in terms of like enjoyment level, even though it's like one of my favorite books of all time. But it's like really hard to say that this is my least favorite, because how do you take a favorite series and say that it's your least favorite book in the series when you'd rather reread this one 50 billion times than read other books? Am I making any sense? I don't know if I'm making any sense. It's just really hard to say that this is my least favorite, because I love every single Harry Potter book. The reason why this one is my least favorite, though, I know exactly why. I really don't like cocky and arrogant characters, and Gilderoy Lockhart is one of them. So he is my least favorite character. Well, he's tied with Wormtail for my least favorite character. But despite me not liking Lockhart, like Lockhart does have some occasionally fun moments in the story, and I love this one so much, and I love how much this one like connects to Half-Blood Prince, and that's like a big deal for me because I absolutely love Half-Blood Prince, and Half-Blood Prince is my favorite movie, and I love just how dark and complex Half-Blood Prince gets, so I love how Chamber of Secrets connects to Half-Blood Prince so much. So yeah, this was 5 stars. As I said, 4th time rereading it, and I absolutely love it, and I will reread it every year after this for the foreseeable future. And then I read a book that I didn't like because most books that I read in the month of April I did not enjoy. I read Once Upon a Real Good Time. This is by Lauren Blakely, and it is the first book in the Heartbreaker series. So one of my goals for this year and for every year for the foreseeable future is to read more free iBooks I download on my phone. Oh my freaking gosh, my cat just coughed up another hairball, but this time on my mattress. I don't sleep with sheets, so on my mattress. I don't know what's going on with her hairballs. I've been giving her medicine that helps with hairballs, so maybe I just need to give her more? I don't know. So Once Upon a Real Good Time follows Campbell and Mackenzie. And both Campbell and Mackenzie are single parents, and Mackenzie likes to go to bars and play trivia, and she's like really good at it. So she goes to a bar to play trivia, and she sees this guy Campbell, and she immediately feels attraction to him. And Campbell sees her and thinks she looks mighty fine. So they have a one-night stand. And Mackenzie loves this one-night stand because she hasn't really had any sort of relationships for a really long time. So she's very excited to have had this one-night stand that made her so happy. She thinks she could potentially have more with this person, but then she finds out that Campbell is gonna be her son's music teacher. So there's like some forbidden romance type stuff in there because Mackenzie doesn't want to damage her son's like music lessons because of her relationship with his teacher. So here's the thing, I was really sick when I was in Seattle and I was feeling like crap, and I finished reading Chamber of Secrets and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna like read a romance. So I found this one on my iBooks because I downloaded it a while ago. I don't know if it's still free, but it was free when I downloaded it. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna read it, and it was a good distraction from the fact that I was feeling insanely sick. Tried not to talk about like how sick I was, like what exactly my symptoms were, because like I don't want to like trigger people with exactly the sickness, although I'm sure you can imagine based on the way that I'm talking about this. So I had a lot of issues with this book though, even though it was like a good escape from how sick I was. First of all, I felt like a lot of like the internal dialogue was very like repetitive. I just felt like I kept reading the same thing over and over again for the majority of the book. I felt like some of the writing was like really cringy. Like, let me give you a couple examples. Okay, I'm gonna try and do ones that are very like appropriate because I don't want to like read off smutty quotes on my YouTube channel. So here's one. He only reads bios of sports stars if they're good guys and treat their wives well and don't have criminal convictions. A very weird thing to say, and also like that is the bare minimum that a boy should be doing when he's consuming any sort of content involving celebrity and public figures. Here's another one. You're wasting your youth as a martyr, you know? No, I'm giving him stability, you man. You know, I'm not gonna say the full word there, but what the frick? Like, how is this in a published book? And there are some worse ones, but they have inappropriate language in it, so I'm not gonna be like reading them off here. You can go ahead and check out my full review for this if you want. It's on my Goodreads. And then I didn't really like Campbell. Like, I understood Mackenzie a lot better and I liked her a lot more, but Campbell like pushed boundaries that Mackenzie set a lot, and I was struggling with that. Like, Campbell just really needed to respect Mackenzie's boundaries better. And here's the thing, if Mackenzie was pushing the boundaries because she's the one who set them, I would be more okay with it. But Mackenzie's the one who set the boundaries and Campbell was the one who were pushing the boundaries. So I was not comfortable with that whole dynamic between them. Also, I found it very weird that like the author of the series began establishing the couples for the sequels to this book like really early on. Like, I have read a lot of romance series, or at least the first books in a lot of romance series, and generally it's in the last like 5% where the couples for later books is established, but in this one it did it like way sooner, and I was like, hey, can we like finish the story between Campbell and Mackenzie before you start setting up your next books in the series? Yo, this video is a mess because there's currently 2 bugs outside my window doing the nasty, and my cat just puked up another hairball. What's going on today? But anyways, back to Once Upon a Real Good Time. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. I would have given it 1 star, but I just found like it was a really good distraction from like reality, so that's why I gave it 2 stars instead of 1. But generally, I didn't like this book, and I feel like it could have been a lot better, but it just was not. Then I read an arc. I read Is It Hot in Here or Am I Suffering for All Eternity for the Sins I Committed on Earth? This one came out on April 18th. I won this one in a Goodreads giveaway and I was really excited to read this one because that title is honestly iconic. This book is by Zach Zimmerman. This is a collection of essays that he wrote about his life. Oh my gosh. Okay, how do I even like summarize this? There is no connecting thread between all of the different essays in here. So there is no way to summarize this book. I was interested in this book because of the title and also because it was advertised as LGBTQ+. It is LGBTQ+, but that is not the connecting thread through these essays. The only connecting thread is that Zach Zimmerman wrote these essays. So I was like, how do you market a book when there's nothing in common between these essays? There is no theme. It isn't generally giving you an overview of Zach's life. So it felt a bit all over the place. I felt like he had some like quirky sort of like humor in the way that he wrote, but generally his stories weren't really that interesting. There was nothing appealing about them, and most of them I was reading them going, what is the point of writing these essays and having them published in this book? The only one that I liked, let me see if I can remember what it's called. The only essay that I really liked is called Number 2, and it's like halfway-ish, over halfway-ish into the book, and it is about a shooting. And it is about the impact of the shooting on Zach, and Zach is remembering his classmate who died in the shooting. I found that one to be really deep and heartfelt, but it was like a needle in a haystack because it's the only interesting or different story in here that really stood out to me. All the other essays were just bland and boring. So because I really liked Number 2 a lot, I ended up giving this 2 stars. Although honestly, like, I should have given it 1 star because of how like disappointed I was in it and how bored I was out of my mind with it. But Number 2 was just an essay that had a really deep impact on me. And I don't know if I'd say that it was worth it to read this whole book just for the essay Number 2, but I would say that I really, really appreciate Number 2, and I wish Zach Zimmerman had taken more heartfelt stories like that one and put it into this collection of essays. I read at least 1 Kindle Unlimited book a month because I'm trying to make sure that I'm using my subscription, because if I don't read at least 1 a month, then it's pointless to have a subscription to Kindle Unlimited, you know? I read Megan, which is by Carol Llewellyn. I never know how to say your last name. Llewellyn. Llewellyn? Llewellyn? I don't know. This is like described like its catchphrase thing, headline thing, I forget what you call it. It says that it's an utterly gripping historical family saga, and I need to read a family saga for a challenge I'm doing on Goodreads, which I will link that group that I'm doing the challenge in down in the description below. The group is called Shine and Shadow, and I'm doing like this year-long readathon with them, so I had to read a family saga, so I chose this one. My cat just hurled again, and I'm gonna be very frustrated if I have to take her to the emergency vet. I've had to take her to the emergency vet before because she's had this happen before. And they were just like, everything's fine. And I was like, my cat hurled over 10 times in 20 minutes and you're just gonna tell me my cat's fine? I love doctors. How dismissive they are of both human and animal problems. Megan basically follows this girl named Megan. Of course, obviously. So Megan's family is struggling financially, so she goes and she takes a job as a maid. However, her job as a maid doesn't go as expected because one of the like owners of the house, one of her like masters, one of the people that she has to like look up to and do everything he asks, takes a unfortunate liking to her. So yeah, I'm not sure how well this really like follows how a family saga is supposed to be. It was my first one, but I was reading reviews and people were saying that family saga are supposed to follow like multiple generations of a family, but that didn't do that. It just focused on Megan and a little bit on her relatives. So I was not a huge fan of this book. I found a lot of the book to be boring. I did like the like final conflict at the end of the book. I found that to be interesting, but like by that point I was just like so done with this book that like even though I slightly enjoyed that conflict, it couldn't save the book for me. And I was really especially frustrated with the dealing of sexual assault in this book. I mean, this book doesn't like glorify it or anything, so don't worry about that, My issue with it is that the sexual assault is very graphic and it doesn't have a trigger warning in the book. And there are some scenes where the main character Megan is engaging in consensual adult stuff, but those scenes were not graphic at all. So I don't understand why the author like brushed over the consensual scenes and then went more into detail in the essay scenes. So that was really frustrating for me, and it doesn't really entirely make sense for me. Like, I don't know what was going through the author's brain as she was writing this. I found that a little messed up, even though it's hard to like put into words exactly like what's wrong with that. It just feels wrong to me. I didn't really care for any of the characters in this book, so even though like bad stuff and unfortunate stuff was like happening to the characters, I didn't care. There wasn't enough interesting things about these characters to make me care. I feel like all the characters can be grouped into one of two groups. So vile, disgusting characters who make you want to rip your hair out, and boring characters who you could care less about. So yeah. This book was not for me, and I ended up giving it 2 stars, and I'm surprised that it has such a high star rating on Goodreads. I don't know, but Megan was not for me. And then I read another physical arc, and this one came out on April 25th. I believe I won this one in a Y'all West or Y'all Fest giveaway, but I went to try and like find the email to say that I won, and I couldn't find the email. So pretty sure it's from Y'all Fest or Y'all West, but it could be from something different. This is the book, That Self-Same Metal by Brittany N. Williams. This is one of 3 out of 9 books I actually enjoyed this month. Although I would say that this is like closer to like not being great than closer to me saying that I really enjoyed it. If that makes any sense, I'll explain further. So there's characters in here who have powers from the Orisha, and the main character Joan is one of them. Her power is that she can control metal. So there is Fae in this story as well. So normally they just see like a color around the Fae, these people with powers. And the Fae normally don't cause that many issues. However, there starts to be an uptick of issues with Fae, and Joan gets pulled in to this whole Fae issue. Now, in the midst of all this, Joan is part of this company of actors. She's not allowed to perform on stage since she is a woman, but she crafts the blades for them, and her brother is in the troupe of performing actors. So it's a historical fantasy with some romance in it. So I found that the magic in this book was written really well, and it was really interesting, especially Joan's power of controlling metal and how that works. I really enjoyed that part of it. I wish that the Fae would have been described better, because the Fae sort of take on like an Alice in Wonderland feel. Like there's no rhyme or reason for what they do. They can do anything whenever they feel like it, and their powers don't really like seem to fit to any like magical system of rules or anything, which sort of frustrated me. So I'm hoping that in the sequel Brittany and Williams really goes into the Fae more, but I felt like the powers from the Orisha were like really well done. I liked the action scenes in this book, especially the action scenes with like multiple characters. They were written really well. I loved all the side characters in this book, but I didn't like Joan very much. I found her to be slightly annoying, so the side characters really carried the story for me. I wasn't a huge fan of the romance, because I found the romance to be somewhat more like lustful as opposed to like having chemistry and true like connection between the characters. But I did like how this romance is sort of a love triangle with a potential for polyamory. I thought that was interesting, and I don't see that representation very much in books. I did find myself bored at some parts in this book, so like this book wasn't the greatest, but it was fairly entertaining, and compared to like the majority of the books that I read this month that I didn't like, this one was really good. So I give this one 3 stars. I am planning on continuing with the sequel, because I did enjoy this one enough to want to continue with the series. The series is called the Forge and Fracture Saga. The second book is coming out in 2024 is what Goodreads said, so I'm hoping to get my hands on the sequel to read that at some point. So I would recommend That Self-Same Metal overall to people, but just know that it does have some flaws. I think that there will be a lot of people who like it. I think there will also be a lot of people who don't like it, so I'm sort of in the middle in my thoughts on it, but I would say that generally I enjoyed it, so I would recommend it if the synopsis sounds interesting to you. I need to stop rambling because I have been recording for 35 minutes now. It's gonna be cut down drastically for the sake of the video, but yeah. The next book that I read was Perilous Times by Thomas Steele, and this book comes out on May 25th, and oh my lord, was this book terrible. So Perilous Times is set in a futuristic world in which climate change is really bad, and it's gotten to the point where sort of humans can't really like reverse the damage they've done to the planet. In this world, all the Knights of the Round Table have taken this sort of like oath, this like magical thing where they're gonna come back to life every time that Earth is in trouble to go help and save the world. Well, specifically, I think they worded it as Britain as opposed to like the world. So this book follows Kay, who is King Arthur's brother, and he comes back to life because obviously the world is in complete disarray, and it is epically failing since climate change has completely wrecked the world. And Kay soon bumps into this girl named Miriam, and Miriam is a climate change activist who's part of this feminist group. So her group is trying to disrupt the higher people in power who are destroying the world. So that's sort of where it starts off, and the plot goes really like more from there. I found Perilous Times overall to be really boring. I didn't care for any of the characters. I mean, I liked Merlin, but his part in this book is so small that if you're just reading it for Merlin, like, don't read this book. I really thought that it would be interesting to have the climate change in here. However, I felt like the way that, like, the activists were described was sometimes, like, not the greatest. Like, I don't know, it felt like they were really disorganized, and some of them felt like they were just silly and not serious, which how can you take an issue like climate change seriously when you don't have good activists trying to like advocate for those causes? Like, we have Greta Thunberg in our world now and she's doing a great job, but like if we were to have activists like what is in Perilous Times, like we would all just not deal with climate change unless we identified with being silly and not organizing the group well, if you know what I mean. And honestly, like, overall, this book was just so dull that I felt like I was forcing myself to finish it, and my favorite thing about this book was when I finally finished the book. I'm proud of myself for finishing it, but it was just so disappointing, and I was just hoping for better. And there's also queer rep in here, and so this was, like, pitched as a queer, like, book with climate change and with Arthurian myths, and I really wanted that, but this book just did not deliver. It was so boring and so not what I wanted. So I ended up giving this one star, and it was my least favorite book of the entire month. And there's 2 books left, and these books I enjoyed, but they were just graphic novels, so I read them really quickly and they didn't take up very long for me to read. Like, I feel like most of the books that I didn't like this month, it took me forever to finish reading them. The first graphic novel that I read this month is an arc, and this one comes out on August 15th. This is A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll, and this I got at Emerald City Comic Con, which is why it says Emerald City Comic Con exclusive. So I overall like this one. Like, it wasn't the best, but it was fairly entertaining. Wait, I was gonna show you some of the artwork, but because it's a arc, I can't do that, I don't think. So A Guest in the House follows Abby, and Abby gets married to this man, and this man has a daughter. So they're all living in this town, and Abby's life is sort of boring. But Abby is starting to realize that something is off, specifically about her husband's deceased wife. So a supernatural mystery starts to ensue. It's sort of eerie and suspenseful, and I really liked how eerie and suspenseful it was. I really liked how I wasn't able to like predict what was going to happen. So I was like captivated from the start. I really thought that the drawings were done really well to complement the story, and I really liked when the artwork would like take drastic, unexpected turns that I wasn't expecting. However, the characters in the story were really bland, and I struggled with some parts of the story with how confusing they were. Like, there's some like imagination type stuff that goes on in here, and I struggled with the transition from the like stuff that's actually happening and the like imagination stuff. So I was really confused with imagination stuff at first. It took me a while to get used to that, and it also took me a while before I understood the ending. It took me like 45 minutes of sitting there and staring at the book to figure out what the ending meant. Like, it was that confusing. I mean, it was shocking, but like you have to sit there and think about it for a while before you're like, oh, that's what the ending means. So I wish that the confusing stuff would have been cleared up, and I wish that the characters were more interesting, but overall I did find this book really entertaining, so I gave it 3 stars. And the final book that I read this month is Demon Slayer Volume 3. Demon Slayer is one of my favorite animes of all time, so I have been enjoying reading the manga. This one I gave 4 stars instead of 5. I thought I would give this one 5 stars. The reason why I gave this one 4 stars, even though I really enjoyed it, is because this one has the Suzumi mansion in it, and I found that the mansion is better in the anime because you can get the like auditory aspects to it. Like, in the anime, this mansion was like sort of creepy and eerie from the drums, but you're just reading onomatopoeias in here, so like, you know, the anime is a little better with this part of the story, but I did really enjoy this one. That's why I gave it 4 stars. Also, can I just say, Zenitsu, he still is probably my favorite character. He might be my second favorite character. However, his like moments where he's hitting on women and like trying to get them to marry him hit very different after having bad experiences with men. Like when I watched the anime, I had like not really that many bad experiences with men, like romantically, I guess, like, you know, crossing boundaries. But I have had like multiple men make me uncomfortable with what they've been saying to me lately, and I'm like, hey yo, Zenitsu, you need to take it down a notch and just be your silly goofy self and stop trying to go after women. Yeah, I'm not gonna elaborate more on my experience with that at this moment in time, but those were all the books that I read this month. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I really have to cut down this video a ton. It's currently at 43 minutes long. I hope all of you had a better April than me. Like, April was not a good month for me. And I hope all of you have a great May. Go ahead and read tons of books. Have lots of fun. Have a great last month of spring. And then summer's here. I'll talk to all of you in my next video. And until next time, goodbye.